Hey there, TouchDesigner programmers. So, where we left off in this wild, crazy adventure is we just finished our external Python shenanigan, etc., etc., etc. And now, after all this labor and like wild, crazy silliness, the question we might have is, isn't there a better way to handle like the rigmarole of making this all work? And sure enough, there's something that you can consider, think about, fight with, wobble with, as you will. So I've been thinking about this problem a lot, and I'm going to share the approach that I have taken for this particular challenge. And this is, it's not perfect, but it's certainly a different way to work and think about working. And hopefully it will inspire some of you to think about the ways that you want to work and how you want to take on some of these challenges. So what are we up to? What do I want more than anything? What I'd like to be able to do is I would love to end up with something like this, like a little base goober here that I could just take, drop into any old network, and then have it work without a hitch and without any, huffle puffle fussle muscle. So that's, it seems like a tall order, but we can in fact jump on this problem and use a bunch of the techniques that we just learned about externalization and where we want to stick files and all of those bits, bobs, and what have yous. So to get into the meat of it, what we're going to do is let's close this project. And here in our repo, we're going to go up one more layer, and there's this extra little goober in here that's called dev template. So the thing that you find here in dev template is actually based off of something else that's on the GitHub. And on GitHub, in my soup of repositories that we have here, there's this thing, TouchDesigner template talks. There's not any good documentation yet. It's coming, I promise. And this whole shenanigan, the whole approach to this is really aimed at solving this particular problem. So you're welcome to clone this repo, kind of take it for a test drive, and use it as the foundation for how we're going to start to think about solving this problem. Okay, so what does that look like? What might that look like? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go ahead and open up our finished project. I'm going to stash it over to the side because I want to remember the things that we did. But hopefully you should be able to follow right along with what we're doing. So I'm going to bump back up again, and that dev template folder is where we're going to start. Now I've got an extra bit in here that you probably don't have. Goodbye, window. Which is, you should see here in mind that I have this thing called release. We're going to check that out in just not too many shakes. So here inside of dev, this begins to work more like an IDE, more like an interactive development editor than kind of a traditional TouchDesigner kind of projecty thing. And if we open up this dev-env, this is the tow file that acts as the kind of shell around all of our packaging and what have you. This is the kind of home base for a bunch of those pieces. So what's in here exactly? Well, there's my handy dandy little save mechanism. I love that goober. There's this thing that's called save for release, which we're going to look at in a minute. And then here's this base template. You might have a big X on this if you are working on a Mac, because SVGs don't play nice on Mac right now. But don't worry, I hear that's changing. And our component's got a few kind of fun, wobbly, interesting pieces here. So I leave this with an admin panel. And what we're going to do right away is we're going to right-click on this. We're going to disable the read-only part of this, and we're going to rename this QR code. And then I'm going to go ahead and enable read-only again on this. The idea of this template is that it's your starting point, it's your boilerplate, it's the stuff that you can work from every single time. And so hopefully what you end up with here is you've got a set of kind of like stable pieces that are all of the ingredients that you need to really kind of get your hands dirty and have a lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this from being base_template to being base QR code. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it as base template, because when we zoom in, the way that we're already set up here to externalize this, it's going to actually handle a bunch of that saving rigmarole for us, which is what I would like. So let's zip inside and let's take a quick tour of what's in here. So there's a few exciting pieces, and most of these elements you'll see are actually already set to be externalized if I can externalize them. And what does that mean? That means that a lot of the work that we do here actually lives more in an editor than here inside of Touch. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to open this whole thing with code because I want to have my VS Code window kind of waiting here for me. I see there's TouchDesigner modules. There's this thing template. That's where all my good stuff lives. If I zip inside, we should see all of the things that are in here waiting for us. And what I want to do is I want to take advantage of the bits and pieces that we've learned already and kind of minimize the amount of repetitive work that we're going to kind of face and wrangle. So here we've got an external file called rex. This is our requirements file. And if we look over here in VS Code, we'll see that if we look in our template, there's a requirements.txt. Here, this example is pointing to phue. That's the thing that this jumped from. But we'll remember that the actual requirements that we need from our last project, if we were going to adapt, and hint, hint, that's what we're going to do. We're going to adapt the piece that we just made, is we want to make QR code PIL, right? The QR code version that includes Pillow to be part of our requirements. You'll see the background flashed. The way this is set up right now, before the sync to file feature was added, I had to do a little extra wrangling to get pieces to update automatically. So that's part of what that flashy flash business that you see is. The other things that we need to do next is we need to think about our class here, our execute, and then finally our parameter execute. So all the control pieces for this. If you want to think about using an icon here, I like using an SVG. Scalable vector graphics are really handy because you can change them to any size, which are pretty rad. If you're working on a Mac that's not very friendly at the moment, there are other options, like you might use a PNG instead. If you're hunting for a place to get icons, I like the material design icons by Google an awful lot. They're free to use and pretty rad. And if we do a little searching here, where'd they go? Let it go. There's a whole bunch of different kind of bits that we might pick from. So let's see. This is a thing that uses a camera. Oh, look at that. There's our camera enhanced. Let's take a look at this one. I'm going to go ahead and download the SVG for this. I'm going to save this. That's fine. Great. The other thing that you'll notice here in our project is inside of our development environment bit here. If we go up a layer, we'll see there's a folder called assets. And the reason I use this thing is I actually just reuse the same name every single time on the icons in these. So I'm going to just go ahead and nerf that goober. I'm going to change the name of the one I just downloaded to icon. And I'm going to pull that on over. And hopefully we should see that if we pulse reload that here, on the TouchDesigner side of things, we already have our icons kind of nicely updated for us. So we've got one thing we can check off our list. We've got our requirements bit that's added here, and now we actually can just worry about changing the extension. So our template extension, right, this is where all the fun stuff lives that's going to actually drive our application. And if we remember, this is a relatively small chunk of the work that we did. The first thing that we need to make sure that we did is we imported QR code. So we had to make sure we pulled that bit in here. We should see back here in Touch that's going to complain right away. It's grumpy about a lot of things. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that here in one moment. We also had a few other pieces that we put together and took advantage of. I'm going to use this initialization bit to set up some of those things. So My op is going to be my op, this bit that I pass into it. I'm going to rename the extension for this also. I think I want this to be called QR code. Excellent. We're going to have to fix some things in our network. Let's do that now before we get too far away. Let's zip out a layer here. We'll notice on the extensions page, we need to make sure that we change this to QR code. That's the name of the class that we're using. We'll see that we still have a goofy little wobble, which is complaining that there's no QR bit that we can, QR code goober that we can import. So let's fix that. If we go up over here to our project, we'll see in dev, there's a folder called dep. And this is what's going to hold all of the things that we need for our project. Now, in this little execute helper module, there's a bunch of helper scripts in here to kind of do a bunch of the setup work for us. So we should be able to just delete that folder completely. On our execute, we should be able to pulse the create. And we should see it do all that really hard work that we did the last time around. In addition, what it's going to do for us is it will also add all the folders that we need. So it added our dependencies folder, it added a Python folder. You'll notice it also added a little folder called QR code. This, the name of this folder comes from over here on our admin page, the name. That's what made that. And inside of this folder are the scripts and the requirements text for all of the installation that we've got to do. So there's a couple kind of interesting edge cases that I haven't spent a bunch of time thinking about just yet, how I want to handle them. But I did want to make sure that we kind of neatly segmented different toxes that you might add to a project in a way that you could get to both the requirements and then the install script that's running.